This dick ain't free. Coming down. Matter of fact, in the intro. Oh. What's up, everyone? My voice isn't too pleasant to listen to right now. A little scratchy, a little nasally, got a cold going on. It doesn't matter. As Marshawn Lynch once said, you know why I'm here. It's time for a review of the new Kendrick Lamar album, To Pimp a Butterfly. Kendrick Lamar, West Coast, Compton rapper. Since his first studio release, Section 80, he has been regarded as one of the most talented artists in rap and hip-hop music, and his last release, Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, did nothing but elevate that position after it received universal acclaim. Topics talked about on Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, such as street violence, street life, money and how it corrupts, and the pressure from your peers and the outside world are pretty much the same areas covered on To Pimp a Butterfly. But here, Kendrick is at the opposite end of the spectrum from where he was on Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, where he was just living a low life in the ghetto and doing street stuff. Now he's a well-recognized, famous artist who is adapting to the changes that his fame has brought on. And this metamorphosis that Kendrick undergoes throughout this album is actually detailed within it. You can see it happening before your eyes. He creates this poem that basically summarizes not only every topic in the album, but the entire overall theme of To Pimp a Butterfly and what that title means. Kendrick gives the first two lines of the poem after the third song, and from that point on, every song or every other song following has the next lines of the poem at the beginning or end of the track. And the extra lines he adds onto the album are topically related to the song that it accompanies, whether it comes before or after. Meaning that what's going on in these songs are the actual experiences that Kendrick is having, and when he adds to the poem, you can see how it's affecting him and how he's changing. Good Kid, M.A.A.d City was billed as a short film inside of an album. Although To Pimp a Butterfly doesn't explicitly go for that approach, it still feels like you're listening to something really cinematic when you hear it all out, with the way this poem progresses and all the spoken words sort of coming in as little skits and summaries of what's going on. And then it all wraps up in the crazy ending to this album, which I'll talk about later. Sonically, this album took me by surprise. It's extremely funky, which I didn't see coming. I was expecting, honestly, more of Good Kid, M.A.A.d City type production here. There's some jazz influence too, which I was expecting more of, but funk and jazz are the main things that you're going to be hearing throughout this record. I think the instrumentals are much more artistically styled and layered. They're much more subtle, which means that I think this album is somewhat of a challenge to Kendrick's fans. I think if you're a casual listener and you go into this looking for swimming pools, a bitch don't kill my vibe, a backseat freestyle, you're probably not going to find it. When I say this instrumentation is subtle, there's no booming bass or in-your-face snare. There's just a really well-woven tapestry of jazz, funk, and old-school hip-hop that evolves and is always in motion, and it changes like Kendrick is changing over the course of these tracks. Kendrick's best quality might be his ability to really make issues personal, and what I mean by that is when he's talking about a hot topic like hood violence or racism, what he'll do is instead of saying, oh, well, this happened here, and this happened over here, and in the West Coast this happens, and in the South there's this problem, what he does is he'll act as an individual and act out their position in a situation. Like, for example, I'm talking about maybe Keisha's sister on Sing About Me. And the way he raps from the point of view from all these different people, on this album he sometimes raps as Uncle Sam or the devil or whoever. What it really does is it really makes the messages he's talking about unique to each listener. It really affects them in a way that just spitting out information at them wouldn't. But it also gives multiple points of view for the different topics that Kendrick addresses. You can never say that Kendrick's opinion is too biased because he makes sure to cover every perspective on it when he raps as these different personas. It really makes his music universal, makes it diverse, and it makes it worth coming back to after multiple listens. Last but not least, before I talk about each track individually, there are no big names really throughout this record. There's a brief part from Dre on the first track. There's Snoop Dogg coming in on a hook, which is really well done. There's a huge name on the mysterious last song of the album. which I'll get into, but even that isn't an official feature. So as far as artists competing with Kendrick on this record, there are none. There are some more minor artist names who do their job very well and definitely add some great quality to the record, but there are no Drakes, there are no J-Rocks or Schoolboys or full Dre features like there were on Good Kid, M.A.A.d City. This is Kendrick's music, he's making it how he wants to, and I think he's also delivering a subtle message that there's no one who can even challenge him, so why put anyone on his songs? This is hands down Kendrick's project. It's all his work. You could tell there was some influence, some pressure to get some mainstream appeal on Good Kid, M.A.A.d City from the Drakes, the Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe songs, the swimming pool songs. There was that. There is none of that here. He is not trying to sell records. He is just trying to make music, and he makes great music every step of the way on to Pimp a Butterfly. The first thing you hear on this album is a really old-fashioned sounding Boris Gardner sample that really sets the mood well for what Kendrick is trying to do, how blunt he's trying to be, but how heartfelt he is going about it. Next, a quick spoken word piece talks about the butterfly theme really quick and cements that down early before Kendrick finally comes in and talks about his relationship with fame and how at first it genuinely meant something to him and now he just uses it for pleasure and money and the ability to spend. Money is the topic here as Kendrick is talking about black entertainers, black celebrities, and how they are cultured by America into spending their money lavishly and living these exorbitant lifestyles. But in the end, they're not put in a position to succeed, such as Wesley Snipes, who was convicted for tax evasion, hence the title of the first track, Wesley's Theory. This is part of the idea of pimping the butterfly, how society imposes this pressure on black stars to really spend their money in ridiculous ways, and it ends up catching up to them, such as Wesley Snipes. Next track is an interlude for free, crazy, hectic instrumentation. I love it. It sounds like King Crimson, sort of, when they did that wild jazz part from 21st Century Schizoid, man. I didn't like Kendrick's input at first, but after a few listens, it really grew on me. I love how he builds the pressure until he explodes and just goes hard on this beat in the last 30 seconds, where he's rapping out of his mind, and he's talking about, he's just being a total smartass. He's like, no, I'm not going to be pimped out like these other black stars. This dick ain't free. And this confidence carries over into the next track, King Kunta, where Kendrick is basically saying, I'm on top of the game. The title is a reference to a slave who had his foot cut off for trying to escape slavery so many times. And by Kendrick saying he is the King Kunta, I think he's implying that he is the black man who escaped, who became successful. And there's a lot of ways to interpret this sentiment, maybe that you think Kendrick is saying he's the best out of all his fellow black peers, or maybe he feels like he's the only one to be successful against white oppression. I love how Kendrick sort of leaves open which viewpoint you want to take on this song. The song itself is great too, with a beat and a hook that are too funky to forget. They really dig into you, with references in the verses of yams, an important symbol of power in black culture, and Bill Clinton and Richard Pryor and how power brought them down, showing that it's not just the black community here, but it's also powerful white men too, being affected by power or the yams. The next song, Institutionalized, is a really quiet piece, but it's smooth as butter. It sounds like it could have belonged on Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style. And Snoop actually does the outro and a piece in the middle here that I really enjoyed. I loved his contribution. And you can't even really tell it's Snoop Dogg at first. He does a little bit of inflection on his voice that really makes a difference. What Kendrick is talking about is money and how it affects people, but I think what he's getting at under the surface is how the hood makes people a certain way, and they can never change from that, because he's talking about bringing his friends to the BET Awards, and they're trying to steal other artists' jewelry and possessions, and maybe how Kendrick himself feels inadequate to be discussing these topics because he himself is from the hood, and he's saying, well, I'm no better than these people. He briefly says in the hook how he could still kill someone and not feel too worried about it, which is evident of how Kendrick himself is institutionalized by his upbringing. He still makes mistakes, like he does in the next song, These Walls, where he's talking about the walls of a person and their mind, and prison and the walls of a certain female body part all in one. It's like a triple entendre for the entire song. Genius. In the first verse, Kendrick is pretty much concerned with the walls of said female body part, where he's having this purely physical relationship with this woman, but in the second verse, he breaks through her personal mental walls and can tell that she really doesn't care about him, and her thoughts are with another guy. And in the third verse, it's revealed that the guy that she really cares about is in jail behind prison walls, and it's actually the same dude who shot and killed Kendrick's friend in swimming pools on his previous album, and this is his way of getting revenge. That is absolutely crazy. And the reason the dude is in jail is because he got caught the night that he shot Kendrick's friend for doing some other dumb thing. And Kendrick is using his power and his celebrity the wrong way, which ties into the poem he gives to you at the end of the song. Because everything Kendrick Lamar has ever rapped about can tie together, because he's that damn good. The next song, You, is a contrast to I, which was a really upbeat lead single full of self-motivation, and You is the exact opposite, a really intimate, personal track about depression and about Kendrick being depressed in this hotel room and having conflicts with himself about not being good enough, being inadequate, or just not being a good person, as he described on Institutionalized, or on These Walls, not being genuine enough anymore. On the third verse, Kendrick even raps drunk, just hating himself about his various failures and how he let his friend die without visiting him in the hospital, and just a lot of emotional things going on. A really powerful track for Kendrick to throw out there. The next song, All Right, isn't really a standout track to me, but it does function as a good transition song. It sets the scene well for what Kendrick's about to do in this screenplay. He has hit rock bottom on You, and now he's going to go out and search for answers on how to fix his life. The next song is also For Sale, and another interlude, this one with a little question mark. And Kendrick is primarily rapping from the point of view of the devil under the guise of a character named Lucy. And what he's saying is that this wealth and power and fame are all swirling around him simultaneously with his depression, and he really just has a lot to balance on his plate, and he might sort of be swaying towards this material wealth and temptation as a way to escape his other problems. However, in the end, he does overcome them. One of the important things to take away from this track is just how Kendrick seems to notice these things at the age of 26 after his first album releases. The ages 25, 26, and 30 are really important throughout this album. Try to pick up on them as you listen to them and really get a good idea of why they mean so much. On the next song, Mama, Kendrick raps off the beat, which is a unique approach, but it makes for a pretty interesting listening experience, because when Kendrick's talking, the beat is on pause, and when Kendrick stops, it comes back on, and it's a really clicky, in-your-ear noise that I really like. It really brings you in and catches you, takes your attention. And Kendrick is talking about going home after he has encountered all these problems, and he's looking for answers on how to solve them. So he's hoping that Compton will give him some sort of solace or solution to his issues. And what Kendrick finds is that he thinks he knows everything after going out and seeing the world, having come up through Compton, but he finds that these experiences have just made him more out of touch with his roots and his hometown, and he meets this boy who reminds him of himself as a younger child, but the boy sort of takes a smart-ass approach to Kendrick and sort of gives the vibe that, well, you can't relate to me anymore. So on the next track, Kendrick gets in tune by revisiting himself as a youth when the hood was all he knew, and he's rapping in a different voice with all this slang going on here and there, and that really gives off a good kid, Mad City vibe when you can see Kendrick cruising around in the city with this track on. The most interesting part of this song to me is how Kendrick views politicians as the same as gang members. They're both shady and sneaky, and they achieve what they want through illicit means. He drops that great line where he says, "A new flow of Democrips and Republicans," and he even boldly portrays Obama as the head of said Democrips group, and he is backing their illicit activity. Finally, on this song, on the third verse, he drops what might be the best name drop in hip-hop in the past 5 years. He says, Critics want to mention they miss when hip-hop was rapping. Motherfucker, if you did, then Killer Mike would be platinum. True. I mean, I love to see great hip-hop artists shout each other out, especially one like Killer Mike, who doesn't get enough attention with Run the Jewels or his solo acts, but honestly, Kendrick is on another level, especially on how much a dollar cost the next song on this album, which just plays out like a biblical story from like the New Testament told by Jesus as like a metaphor where Kendrick goes to a gas station and this old guy wants money, but Kendrick says, no, you're going to spend it on booze and drugs. And over this epic beat, Kendrick is just doing a great job storytelling. And in the end, it's revealed the old man is God and he just wanted $1 from Kendrick, but Kendrick was too greedy and it cost him his spot in heaven, showing the value of $1 is so much more than what Kendrick thought. It's just an unbelievable track. It sounds really epic. His verses are as fire as usual. You need like 4 flame emojis to describe this song. Just another great work on this record. The next song, Complexion, is a really nice, quiet follow-up, which has a really simple but profound message, just devaluing the importance of skin color and how it's irrelevant. And it is really a nice, smooth transition and a really good fit between how much $1 cost and the next song, which really hits hard, The Blacker the Berry. Blacker the Berry, a song I've raved about since it came out as a single. I've said maybe the best rap song ever, that's no joke. A song that on the surface appears to be talking about white hatred towards the black community and how it's just a setup to bring the black person down. But if you listen again, you get the impression that Kendrick is also talking about blacks themselves and how through fighting against each other and not respecting each other, that they are themselves bringing their community down. If you want an idea of how many perspectives are covered in a song, take a look at the chorus from Jamaican dancehall artist Assassin, which in itself is a reference to the history of slavery in America, as the first slaves were brought to North America by way of the Caribbean islands. The lyrics reference big chains and whips, which are obviously references to white oppression, so that covers, the viewpoint of white people putting down black people. But also, the idea is flipped towards the end of the hook, and Assassin is talking about how now big chains and whips are signs of success in the black community, meaning obviously cars and jewelry. But there's also the idea underlying that black people are oppressing themselves through these chains and whips by putting their focus towards material possessions and not worrying about more important things. It's just a crazy bunch of ideas melded really well into one parsimonious song, one of my favorites from the record, and Kendrick is saying himself that he is not better than the people who he's referencing in this song when he says that he killed a guy at 16, so why should he feel like he's in a position to make a judgment or call anyone out. The next song, You Ain't Gotta Lie, is definitely less fiery than its predecessor, but I do like the sentiment that Kendrick's going for here. Another interesting point of view, he's saying that one of his friends is trying to act really hood and tough around him, and Kendrick is just telling him to be yourself, and that the people who talk the loudest are not self-confident, or the loudest people in the room have a complex about them. And it's a message that Kendrick has just always spread, to be yourself, and he just reiterates that here pretty well. While I was the lead single from this record, it is not the version found actually on the album. The album version is a live performance. An MC introduces him, and there's crowd noise in the background, and Kendrick ad-libs some of the parts here and there, which really gives it a more natural feel than the original studio version, which I didn't care for too much. But he's delivering this message in Compton to a bunch of people who aren't getting it. They're not getting this self-value, self-importance message from this song, and they actually break out into a fight during the performance, which causes Kendrick to stop and deliver a speech which sounds like just some crazy civil rights speech right in the middle of his performance about his people and fighting amongst themselves and how to value themselves. It's just another crazy moment that just shows Kendrick to be a leader of men towards the end of this record. After so many surreal, just lifelike, epic moments throughout this album, you get to the last track, Mortal Man, where the first 6 minutes are Kendrick talking about other black leaders like Moses and Mandela and Michael Jackson, and how their fans turned away when things went south for these people. Whereas I said sonically and in the pretty long length of this album, it was a bit of a subtle challenge to the people who are going to listen to him, to his more casual fans. This song is a more direct, formal challenge to the people he hopes will stick by him. And after this song is over, the big instrumentation that I love behind this track, some great production, that slowly fades out, and the next 6 minutes are revolving around some spoken word. And to start it off, Kendrick finishes the poem that he's been working on this entire time. Kendrick wraps up the poem, and I've thought that out of all of the crazy things that have happened on this record, like getting back at his friend's killer by sleeping with his wife, or delivering a crazy civil rights speech in the middle of a live performance, or rapping drunk about hating himself. Out of all of this, I did not see the ending of this album coming. Kendrick reads the poem like he has been doing the whole record, but it's revealed he's reading it to Tupac Shakur, who responds and proceeds to have a conversation with Kendrick at the close of this album. I thought the pieces where Tupac talks at first were a voice actor, or maybe just a guy who really sounds like Tupac. But it turns out that the voice clips from him are actually from a Swedish talk show where he performed, and Kendrick took these samples and asked questions to Tupac that would make it sound like they were having a normal conversation. So here I am at the end of this record, listening to Kendrick Lamar have a conversation with a dead MC and hip-hop legend like absolutely nothing strange is happening. After Kendrick has this conversation about politics and life in general, and the black community, and racism, and all these important things, he reads Tupac one more poem about the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, which is sort of more closely related to the butterfly idea than the poem that he previously read. So he addresses the butterfly thing, about a caterpillar turning into a butterfly by admiring the butterfly and aspiring to be like it. And he asks what Tupac thinks. And Tupac doesn't answer, because Tupac was the butterfly, and now Kendrick has become that by aspiring to be Tupac. So Kendrick has made his transformation, and Tupac is no longer needed to assist him. So now Kendrick is the head of the rap world and a pseudo-leader of the black community. Probably the craziest thing I have ever heard on an album ever. It is so goddamn good, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I'm just going to end the album aspect of this video right now. I'm done talking about the record. Usually right now I summarize the album. I'm not going to do that because I've already talked about it for so long and I've still missed a ton. There's so much in this album. It's so layered. It's so complex. It's so very good. One of the questions I got a lot last year was, well, you didn't say anything bad about the Swans album, why didn't you give it to 10? And I think that in its own universe, the Swans album is perfect. Musically, it's perfect. But if you look at it, it doesn't carry the weight of an important album. The Swans, Swans are a pretty underground band. They're not going to change rock music. They're not going to influence it too much. And it's not going to have a social impact. It's just a very good musical record. It's great music. This album is more than music. This album is the type of music that changes hip-hop, that changes rap, that changes generations, that changes how people think. I'm feeling a 10 out of 10 on To Pimp a Butterfly. That's all I have. This is one of the 5 best albums I have ever heard in my life. That's all. Sorry for talking so long. Until next time.